Bruins Beat is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by Game Time. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 back off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Connor, what is up?
Evan, doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Busy weekend of hockey for me. I had a tournament. I was in a tournament playing 4 games. Lost in the championship. It was a good run. They did it by points. Like each period, you had to win your period to get a point. It was really weird because we were 1-2 going to the championship game, which didn't make a lot of sense, but it was fun. Definitely some good workouts, some good times. I dare ask Connor, how was your weekend?
What do you mean?
That's right. Didn't happen.
Yeah, the game didn't happen. We can't keep this. We can't keep this long con going for this long. No, rough weekend. Evan, Terriers came up short against a very good Western Michigan team. A team that you look at the way they play, kind of reminds you a little bit of UConn, which gave the Terriers fits in the Hockey East tournament. Really good forechecking team, really north-south, gave them fits. Terriers came up short. It's unfortunate. They had a hell of a season that I don't think a lot of us expected, probably, in terms of this was almost viewed as somewhat of a bridge year between last year's run, and then, you lose Lane Hudson, you lose Celebrini, and they kind of go right back at it and have a really, really strong push. So unfortunate, but you look at where this team is, the recruiting class coming in, what Pendolf always done there, they'll be in the mix every year. So one of these years they will break through again, but a good year for the Terriers, proud of them, and they'll be right back at it again this next winter.
I was going to say, I think for you, it's going to be so sweet when they finally do it, because you've experienced the heartache of 2015. Game didn't happen, though. That was the real heartache.
It didn't happen. It was heartbreaking because the game didn't happen. Like that's exactly. I was like, what could have been?
It did.
Like, this would have been a great matchup. Like that Providence team, a lot of talent as well. Would have been an unbelievable spectacle. Like at the Garden, 2 New England team. Like would have been great. And it's just what could have been, Evan. Right? Like it sucks.
It sucks. It's a real shame. And then you have this year, which was a tough loss. But I agree. I think BU will be better next year if certain, as long as, Yzerman and, Cole Hudson, guys like that are back. I imagine Yegorov is back. Good recruiting class coming in. So BU should be good. Hockey East will be interesting next year. BC, I don't think will be as good as in past years. You lose Fowler, Leonard, Perreault. The recruiting class coming in is pretty good. I don't believe, outside of Will Moore. And, again, they might do some stuff in the transfer portal. They might get some CHL kids. But I don't see BC being, this power they've been the last 2 years. So, you do, like UMass lost a lot of talent that they shouldn't have. So it'll be an interesting year next year with Hockey East for sure. A big thing on Twitter came out on Monday morning. And we'll start here because we're recording this right before the final game of the regular season. That's it. Then the 24-5 season's over. It's almost done. It's so close to being done. But Chris Curtis, who's the producer of the Greg Hill Morning Show on WEEI, tweeted at 7:15 on Monday morning, breaking, Greg Hill is hearing that there will be a resignation in the Bruins front office on Wednesday, which will be the day after the season ends. WEI has been, kind of not all over the place, but they've had some hits. They've had some misses with the people on the radio station reporting news. Rich Keefe has, hit some things. I remember Courtney Cox tweeted out the Swayman thing, and that was wrong. So it can be hit or miss. But let's dive into this a little bit in terms of, could there be a resignation? What would make sense? And when I look at it, I think people will disagree with me on this. I don't think people will like hearing this. It's only been one bad year. I can't imagine that they would force either Sweeney or Neely to resign because of it. I can't imagine after just one bad year. Now, those guys also would most likely be fired. Maybe Neely they let resign, just say, we can say you resigned. Sweeney, I think, would be fired. I'm not saying he would be this year. I'm saying, if Sweeney's gone, It's because he was fired. He's not leaving on his own. I can't imagine Neely resigning on his own unless he feels like his voice is gone. I mean, you look at the deadline moves they made, and those are, speedy, skilled guys they brought in, probably not Cam Neely guys. I don't know. I don't see how either of the two, Sweeney or Neely, resign after this year. I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the GM perspective, right on to what you said, Evan, like, I know probably Bruins fans don't want to hear this, but I also feel like Sweeney, unless like he just wants to step back, like I feel like from the ownership side, they'd ideally want him for this upcoming offseason. One, to, they've have a long relationship. They've obviously placed a lot of trust in Don Sweeney to make these moves. You wouldn't retain Don Sweeney or have him, you wouldn't move on from him if you didn't give him the clearance and the green light to trade the team captain and 3 or 4 lineup stalwarts, right? If you were going to fire him, because like, I think ideally, as much people are probably going to be clamoring for a new GM this offseason, like, do you want a new, like a completely fresh voice? But not even that, because like I could see why people want that, of like a new perspective, a new voice, something like that. But do you want to fire your GM and uproot the entire front office and like the personnel going into this offseason when you also have a multiple like monumental decisions to make? It like, look at when they decided to make a switch in 2015 with like Chiarelli and Sweeney. I get like it was like you're calling up someone from the same group, right? Where Don Sweeney was just further down in the hierarchy, but still a lot of new faces, a lot of new scouting, a lot of overturn and overhauled situations there. And you have that going into a draft you had to hit. And at the time, no one really knew that that was going to be like this critical rebuild, or that draft was going to be one of the more stacked drafts. And look what happens, right? So it's like, do you want a new GM, someone from outside of the organization who brings in all of his people, and you don't have that cohesion going into an offseason where you have to nail the draft, not just like your potential top 5 pick, but all the selections after that in the second round, where you have to nail if you're making any hockey trades, where you have to nail how you're allocating this cap space if you want to get back at it. Because as you said last week, there's urgency to not just get back in the mix because you feel like you have a team that can compete in the next couple of years, but also you have to make the most of this window with the prime of David Pasternak's career. So it's, do you want to really move on from a GM in that spot? I don't think they want to. So again, unless it's something on Sweeney's pot, like, I don't think that's the best for the organization right now, just in terms of the stability and what you have to do. And I know that probably is going to piss off Bruins fans who just want, they want heads to roll. They want a new blood, new face leading the charge. But I think that instability can cause headaches when really you should be just hitting the ground running this offseason. And I think you're opening up a lot of risk by doing the other thing where it's just bringing in a completely new group of people calling the shots.
Yeah, I think you risk a lot doing that, coming into the situation where they can kind of go one of two ways. You could in theory do a complete teardown rebuild, or what the more likely option is you try to compete next year and you try to build for the future without completely tanking past this season. The other thing about Neely that's interesting is, like, less than a month ago, March 27th, he gave an interview with Jim McBride where he said, I think everything is on the table as far as trying to improve the club. Doesn't sound like a guy who's about to resign. At least to me. He did in that interview. Again, we don't hear it. We just read it. I can't imagine him resigning. I just can't. And, if there's a family thing with one of them, or there's something that came up, obviously that's a different situation. We're just talking straight hockey here. I don't see it with those guys resigning. Now, could it be a smaller thing in the front office? Could it be, other personnel? Could it be a change of a director of scouting or something like that? Maybe. But I think most people would, if you're saying change in the front, a resignation in the front office, I would imagine it would be someone like Neely or Sweeney. And I don't think that, does that apply to Charlie and Jeremy Jacobs in terms of Charlie taking over full time as, the head governor? I don't know if that would be front office. That would be ownership. So that's why I'm very curious to see if something actually does happen, because I'd be surprised by this. And, I know there are lots of fans who want Sweeney gone, who want Neely gone. But it's one bad year. There's the other end of it too, Connor, where it's like, could ownership be mad that they finished as low as they did, that they are a top 5 their bottom 5 team? Is there that element where they look at what they did since the deadline and they don't really see it? They don't like where the team's going. Did they change in the last couple months. Now, I actually think Sweeney did all the right things at the deadline.
Yeah,
I think Sweeney nailed
why
it.
else are you trading those things? You don't trade your captain in 4 or 5 lineup regulars to be like, that's it. Let's get that number 12 pick now. No, fuck off. Like, no, it's you move those guys with the assumption that you're going to now wave the white flag and try to get a top 10 pick. If anything, as you said, Evan, like you that like to have you collapse or just implode to the degree that they did and then get a top 5 pick potentially, that is like the best case scenario. One that you're like, imagine if we do get a top 5 pick out of this year, what you hope is a one-off, right? Like it's almost like I think what Sweeney and the front office did in terms of moving all these pieces, it was the best case scenario in terms of what you want the end goal of this year to be. If you end this year with a lot of cap space, with, again, the results are what they are, and it's been a miserable year, but you get a top 5 pick out of it, and you still have some pieces on this roster that you can build around moving forward.
And you added a first next year.
That. Yes.
So like, that's why I don't, if it's that element of like ownership is angry, we were afraid they wouldn't do what they did at the deadline. We were afraid that they were going to go too moderate, too conservative, and just say, we'll deal Frederick and Brazeau, but we're going to end it there. They went balls to the wall at the deadline. And if that's the reason, I'm not saying it is or that this is even true, but if Sweeney and or Neely resigned or were forced to resign because of the deadline, that would be bad. That would be bad. And I remember we talked about this, you and I did, Kevin Paul DuPont's column from a few weeks ago about how ownership knows everything it knows about hockey through Cam Neely and Don Sweeney. So I can't imagine that they would suddenly be like, we stink, goodbye, those guys are gone. Because I think they actually did the right thing since the deadline. You can get on their drafting, you can get on the Lindholm and Zadorov signings or whatnot, the Swayman signing. But what they did at the deadline, I actually liked, and I thought was the right move to sort of chart the next course for this team. So I'm very curious to see what happens. They'll have an end of season press conference, I would imagine either Wednesday or Thursday. Or they'll definitely have breakup day, which will probably be Wednesday.
They'll probably have breakup day this week. And usually the players want to get out of here pretty quickly. So that'll be this week. And then maybe next week is when they do kind of the, GM, coach, ownership, that kind of thing. That's usually a week or so later. So they usually try to split those things up.
Yeah. And I did this because I listened to the audio that Greg Hill said, and he said, well, someone whispered to me about this. Like, did they mean that like Joe Sacco could be out? I don't like, did they misspeak? If what they're hearing is true, I don't know. I would expect this week, probably. I mean, Sweeney was on Nesson talking to Judd and Brick and mentioned that, Joe Sacco's done a nice job. And I think he said something along the lines of, he'll be, in the running, if he wants to for the next head coach. I would assume they don't do you think they just let him go this week? Or no, they just go through interviews and the job is open and he doesn't get it?
Yeah, I imagine they keep him kind of in the mix and see what it is. It also just depends on something that our good friend Ty Anderson mentioned. It's like, it also depends on what the coaching market is, right? Are there going to be multiple coaches I think we've talked about that we like in terms of like the younger up and coming guys? Is it only David Carl and that's the only guy? Or is it David Carl and, Donskov and Marco Sturm and those guys out there? Because if it's like ends up being barren and it's Mike Sullivan's not in the mix and Pittsburgh's just keeping him under contract and they're just going to, I guess, be chill with being mediocre for the next couple years till Crosby retires. But if it's only, one of Carl who's going to be a top candidate, there's also no guarantee he leaves Denver, right? Like, you don't begrudge any of these guys. Same with like Pandolfo. Like, why would you begrudge a guy from staying in a great spot in college? But if it is just him, and then it's just the retreads that we've seen of John Tortorella and P.L. Laviolette, who seems like there's a revolt going on with like the Rangers. Like, look at how it ends there and how it ends with like Gerard Gallant and some of these guys, where is the 1 year bump worth like the then clown show that is the year after? Or
even like Rick Tocchet.
Yeah, like it's almost like I think you probably wait and see. You consider Joe Sacco and what he's done this year, and I know the results are what they are. He dealt a tough hand, so I don't know if it's going to be an outright like thanks Joe. Like, I think it also you have to see how the rest of the coaching market opens up and who's available, and then you consider it from there. I would say my My hunch is that he's not the head coach next year, Joe Sacco, even though he was dealt a tough hand. But I think they're not just going to outright be like, "Thanks, Joe," because I think you have to see what the market is. If all of a sudden it's like, "All right, like see you, Joe." Oh, between Gallant and Laviolette, like oh, shit. So I think it might depend on who's out there and what their options are.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be Wednesday morning we get a tweet notification that's like, the Bruins have moved on from interim head coach Joe Sacco. I think he'll interview for the position and they'll go from there. We'll hear about it, later on in the spring. I also wonder about a guy like Ryan Mujanel. This is probably something we'll get into later on, but you have him internally. If they go deep in the Calder Cup playoffs, maybe that's an option. I want to get into some end of season stuff because we'll do season wrap ups and things like that as the season rolls on. And if someone does resign on Wednesday, I'm sure we'll be ready with a podcast if that does happen. But first, our friends over at Game Time. It was kind of crappy out last week, Connor, but it is getting nicer in Boston this week. So it is a nice time to go to a Red Sox game. It's so nice out. And the Celtics are about to embark on a nice long playoff run. And there's no better atmosphere than TD Garden come the spring, especially with the Celtics. That place is jumping. You're seeing an all-time Celtics team, a successful one, and one that should go back to the NBA Finals. So go to our friends over at Game Time. There's Game Time picks. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. All-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees. At checkout, there's seat views. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And there's Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app today and create an account and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it, Connor?
A game time.
It is, in fact, game time. So in terms of the end of the year here, they enter the final game. They're still in the 4th draft spot, even though they won on Sunday against Pittsburgh. I know a lot of people wanted them to lose that game. They're a little disappointed that they ended up winning. You have one game left against New Jersey. I haven't seen lines for New Jersey yet. We're recording this Monday afternoon. I'd assume they sit some people. They're already pretty injured. New Jersey's a team I'm not super high on entering the playoffs at all. I gotta say, my playoff takes have been known to be a little cold as time runs along, age a little bit like milk. I kind of see Carolina coming out of the Metro, I think. Unless Ottawa makes a real run. I don't really believe in New Jersey. I don't believe in Washington that much either.
Yeah, I feel like Washington's a team that's due to take their regression is going to hit at some point, and it feels like it is going to be in the playoffs. Yeah, New Jersey is a team that it's so funny. That's one of those groups where you almost hope Washington doesn't become what New Jersey is, because 2 years ago you're like, this team is a friggin' juggernaut. This team's gonna, and then it feels like they almost have already hit their ceiling, and it's now it's just next year, instead of it Jack Hughes will be back, they'll be good to go. It feels like they're just gonna be a 95-point team, and they're just gonna be hovering around this kind of they'll be in the playoffs, but guys are gonna get banged up. They don't have another can't miss prospect coming through. They've whiffed on a few guys that are top 10 picks that didn't pan out. So yeah, I'm not really buying into the hype. Maybe it's just because of Jack Hughes was so terrible in the Four Nations face-off. How you're winning a cup with, but that's maybe just my very small sample size, admittedly. But not too enthused with New Jersey, especially this year with the injuries they are dealing with.
Yeah, and I think when you enter this final game, you do have to lose. I mean, you can't risk this. Seattle is close. I mean, Seattle is right behind you. And you gotta lose. I hate saying that. I've hated for weeks saying these things because it is a loser mentality.
You've come this close, though.
You've come this far, Connor. They have come this far. You can't get here, beat New Jersey, end the season on a 2-game win streak, and then you're pick 6. Could they go to 7?
I don't think so. I think the only teams that could leapfrog them now are just Seattle and the Flyers. Seattle's the bigger threat. Flyers have 2 more games to go, so they just essentially I think need 1 more point to stay where they are. So you got to hope there. And then what you should be hoping for tonight, as we're recording this on Monday, is the Kings to win their game, and then they would lock into home ice, I think, against the Oilers. And then they play tomorrow night against the Kraken, and then they could just roll out their B team if they're already locked in. So you hope that they win tonight. Tomorrow is the they roll out their B squad against the Kraken. So
good
that
point.
is the hope.
Yes. And it's like that meme where it's like when you're in a lose-off and your opponent is the Seattle Kraken. It's like, like they're gonna find a way to. They're always
again,
gonna
like
lose.
The Bruins have been bailed out like the last week and a half. Like they put themselves in the spot with that 10-game losing streak, obviously. But then, like, when they've started to play a little bit better, and they have, like, other than that Chicago game where it was a laugher, they've been competitive, I guess, if you want to say, if you were trying to find a silver lining. But at the same time, like, the Flyers are gutting out wins. They're getting a point or two. They're taking care of business. And even, like, the Kraken, who I've roasted every possible chance, have, like, stayed competitive, and they've clawed out some of these games, gotten some points down the stretch here. So you've been bailed out by these other teams playing better. It's like, it's got to seal the deal, right? That's all it's got to do right now.
Finish the job. Maybe it's going to be the reverse Patriots, where the universe rewards the Patriots for winning. The Bruins will lose and then somehow end up in the number one spot. Maybe that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Did everyone who watched the Patriots win that game, you're like, you're setting the culture for next year. Yeah, it'll be fun when Travis Hunter's reeling in catches next year with Cleveland. Enjoy Will Campbell or trading down in this trash draft. Like, I'm glad you enjoyed that Week 18 win.
Yeah, I can't take it. No, you got it. And I also
you could have Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, but no, you're now stuck with a left tackle with T-Rex arms. Good job, everyone. Glad the win out.
Let's stop those defensive linemen.
Get the good vibes going.
One of my favorite things that's going to come from this season, when the fans get the shirts off their backs, they do this after every the final game of every regular season. I am so excited to see these people down the road with a Houston Dienoff jersey, or a Ian Mitchell jersey, or a Wotherspoon jersey, or these random guys. Maybe they turn into something, maybe they don't. A Callahan. I remember I had a friend. Maybe I've told this story on the podcast before or not. I had a kid I played hockey with growing up. His dad was a season ticket holder. And I'm watching the shirts off their backs. When I was a kid, I thought it was the coolest thing. I was, man, imagine if I got to be out there. And I see him out there. I'm like, holy crap. He got a Byron Bitts jersey. And he wore it the rest of his not rest of his life because he's still alive. But every time I've seen him since, they're gonna bury him in that Byron Bitts jersey, it's phenomenal. Like, that's so sick. So I'm very curious to see the collector's items that come out of this. Of the jerseys they get from certain guys, because they're a Houston Dienoff one I think is going to be a hell of a jersey to get. And I also we'll play this game when the season ends, of kind of going through the roster and be like, who's going to be back here next year? Who's going to be gone? And I think there's a fair amount of guys that you're going to get jerseys from this year. Fans will, and it's going to be like, oh, that guy's gone. Or like if Casey Middlestat gets traded in the offseason, it's like getting a Yoenis Cespedes Red Sox jersey, like
good one.
Guy you had for a little bit of time and then he's gone. So I'm interested to see kind of some of the interesting jerseys that fans get. Before we get into a good bright spot from Sunday's game, I want to remind you guys, for those of you listening to this show, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like, and leave a review. I think it'd be really nice. It'd be nice. We don't usually ask for this. And for those watching the show on CLNS, and go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content. You got Poke the Bear, Pucks with Haggs. Joey Capone does a great show. So there's a lot. Sometimes we'll do live streams. Sometimes these shows run live. Might have to do a live one with Carl Corzini at the end of the year just to do one, maybe. So we'll let you know if that happens.
Without it. Yeah,
it can't. It has to happen. So also please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new video drops. So we'll have a lot of stuff, especially in the off season, especially if big news happens. Like if there was a resignation on Wednesday, we would likely go live. One of us would, or would have a podcast up immediately. So instantaneous.
We got a whole bunch of stuff going on.
There's a lot. I've said a lot over the last couple of months. What are we going to talk about? What are we going to talk about? We're actually going to talk about a lot. There's going to be
going on.
Fallout from this year, but there's also free agency, the direction this team should go in overall, the head coach, the draft, trades. There's a lot. This might be the busiest offseason we've had ever since we started podcasting, with the amount of things that could happen or that will happen. So there's going to be a lot there for you guys to chew on and for us to discuss. One last thing. Fabian Lysell finally gets his first NHL goal a couple days after getting his first NHL point. He has been playing better of late. I was reading Scott McLaughlin from WEEI, and he made an interesting observation on Monday. Said in 10 games since his recall on March 22nd, Lysell leads the Bruins in 5-on-5 shots on goal per 60 minutes, ranks second in shot attempts per 60, and fourth in individual scoring chances per 60. Now, I know what you all are going to say is, I don't care. He only has 2 points, and the Bruins stink right now, and this guy is kind of hit or miss, and I get that. But at least it's encouraging at the end of this year that while the points are not fully there, he has gotten a little bit better as time has gone along, and I don't know, maybe he does compete for a lineup spot next year.
Yeah, I think you're just trying to find any positives you can. And to your point, like, even though it took him, his 11th game with the Bruins to finally break through with a goal, I do agree. I think he's played better, especially down the stretch here. I thought that game against New Jersey last week, granted, everyone played well because they won 7-2, but I thought he was really aggressive there. Had a few slip-ups in the game against Chicago, again, like most of the team, but I think especially early on was being really aggressive with the puck on his stick, trying to make plays happen, and I think probably it's more of a byproduct of the roster around him, but it's easy to notice him out there with the skating, the aggressiveness. Like, he's kind of a East-West player, and I think what we've said before of like what his role can be, like, yes, if you're trying to mold him into the perfect two-way player, I don't think that's going to be the case, but if you have a roster that has guys that we look ahead to next year, right, and you've got responsible two-way players like Kastelik and Minton, and you got like Geeky and Zaka and all these players, you can almost afford to have a guy like Lysell, who I'm not going to say is a one-trick pony or a liability. You don't, it's not like a Willie Mopena. You open for 20 home runs and he's striking out 200 times, or an Adam Dunn or Chris Davis, anything like that.
Joey Gallo, we could name all of them.
Yes, but if you have, name all the 200 strikeout, 40 home run guys in baseball history. But if not a lot happens this offseason, Evan, maybe that's what we end up doing. It's just a podcast of us just naming baseball players.
That would be kind of fun. There's a crowd out there that would be very enjoyable.
Do a live broadcast, and it's just everyone sending in a comment one at a time.
Well, have you ever? There was a game we used to play in college where you would go it was during COVID, so we were kind of bored. You go person by person. It'd be like, obscure Celtics players from the 2000s, and like everybody you go around until someone doesn't get it, and then they take a drink if they don't get it or something.
PJ Brown.
Like, yeah, I think you could go like those games. I could go forever on, especially like mid 2000s to like mid 2010s baseball players. Like, holy crap! I mean, the useless knowledge I have from those years is generational.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And so, like, again, long-winded, but you look at Lysell, and if he is like your skilled scoring player that maybe isn't the most defensively stout player, but injects that speed and the skill into your lineup that you desperately need, then there could be a place for him. And I think you hope that now that he finally scores a goal and has some of that weight lifted off of his shoulders, he ends the year on a high note on Tuesday, because, again, is he a guaranteed lock for next year? No, it remains to be seen what exactly his role is, but I think even Joe Sacco mentioned it on Monday that every single game he's played, he's been better and better. So maybe that changes the overall outlook, where they give him another look next year, and it's not just a situation where I feel like a week or so ago we're like, nah, so like Lysell's probably not going to be here next year, right? Like, he's either going to want to go somewhere else or the team is ready to move on. Like, you do see the skill and the potential there with that type of player, and you hope that if there's anything you've gained from this month-long stretch of essentially consequenceless, no consequences in these games, it's these guys getting the opportunity to kind of find their footing and at least show what they can do. And I think you're at least seeing that as of late with a guy like Lysell.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing with him. And I think when you look at next season, I don't think they're going to do what they did this year, where it was almost like, hey, we're going to kind of hopefully carve a path for Fabian to get in the lineup, and, second line right winger spot is open. And I think it's going to be, because I think logically next year he could be a third line right winger. I'm not saying he's going to be. I'm not saying that he's earned it or anything. But like, if he was your third line right winger next year, it wouldn't blow my mind. But I do think they go out and try to add guys. And I also look at, like, this is something I talked with Andrew Raycroft about on last episode is they just are missing so many veteran guys in the lineup. And I'm not saying they need to be prominent players, but like Shattenkirk, Van Riemsdyk, Maroon, those were 7th D and 4th liners and fringe like guys in the lineup. So I also wonder if they go out and try to get a couple of those guys if they can in free agency. And then those guys are competing for third line spots with Fabian Lysell. That also wouldn't shock me. And can Fabian Lysell beat out an NHL vet for that spot? Remains to be seen, but you know what? You said it, Connor. At least he ended the season on somewhat of a high note. And again, and then a guy like Georgi Merkulov, I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for him. So we'll see, but one game left, Connor. What can the people look forward to from you at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, we're going to have you covered every step of the way, I would say, this Bruins season. But as you said, one game to go. So maybe more importantly, this offseason, we'll have you covered for the draft, free agency, coaching changes, front office changes, all that stuff. It's going to be a jam-packed summer, and we'll have you covered every step of the way over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. So you can read my stuff over there. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. We also have to remember to do a podcast at some point where we highlight all of our amazing predictions.
Yes,
we
God
made
help
at the
us.
beginning of the year.
It is. I looked at it again over the weekend, and I was like, "Good Lord, I'm going to get smoked when I read this thing off again."
Well, I didn't write it, but I think we must have done a podcast where we talked about them and I made a bunch of predictions. So I have to go back and listen to that, which is going to be harder because it's harder to listen to yourself just be so blatantly
wrong. Yes, like, exactly.
Whoa.
It's so like Jimmy Haggs all over again.
Jimmy Haggs, that's right. That was we'll take the victory lap on that. But that's Bruins Beat. You Bruins Beat listeners, which is presented by Game Time. You Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.